I guess the most important thing, as people who are from transition towns and interested in innovation and interested in energy, the most important thing I think that I could say from someone who has studied math, medicine, and architecture, but in architecture specifically around environment and energy, the future is very bright. We have a lot of hope for what we're doing, and these people that are sitting in front of you have had a lot to do with what's going on locally, right around the corner. So if you're all from, I don't know exactly where it's from or what their initials are, but we'll find that out in a minute. But just to sort of paint a quick picture, it's my name is Agamemnon Otero, and Brixton Energy Solar One Cooperative was the first inner-city cooperative on social housing in the UK, and it happened in March 31st. It went operational of 2012, and that was a regular council flat block, just like one of these buildings that is outside, or a building just like this that many of you have in your local areas, and it was a big open space on the roof, and it wasn't particularly interesting building at all. It was just a normal gray, actually it was probably an uninteresting looking building that everybody just passed by, that you pass by every day, and on the top of it had the capacity of putting about 50 kilowatts of solar panels on it. So to give you an idea of what that means is that a block like that of like 5 stories, maybe 63 flats in there, so there's 5 stories. It's one long puppy that runs from the hub to up to the top of the road there. One block. Those solar panels that were put onto that generate in the summertime about 250 to 280 kilowatts a day, which is more than the total consumption of all the people living in that block, in the 63 flats. And that was a disused flat roof in Brixton on social housing owned by Lambeth. So when you look out through your neighborhoods and and think about your home, and you just think, every one of these roofs has a potential. The first project was solar, but that doesn't mean there aren't other forms of energy. So community-owned green energy cooperatives is just that. It means we have solar thermal, CHP, and I'm sure that everybody will have a chance to talk about those things. But as far as that image goes, that sort of vision goes, every one of these flats, Baker Tilly did some research this year about the sort of ability, the sort of housing platform that people could do from community homes, and there's about 3.5 gigawatts of energy that could be developed through communities. And so that is a huge capacity, and that's very conservative. That's only doing like 5 to 10% of the housing. So, and that's using all different types of media. So, the first project was Brixton Energy Solar 1, and then there was a second project, which was Brixton Energy Solar 2, which was very similar on the same estate, except 5 blocks separately. And the third one, which we're very proud to be working with Howard and Southern Solar on, is Brixton Energy Solar 3, which is going to be on the Rubel Park estate. And this is a much bigger project. It's much bigger. It's much bigger in my mind because we have 4 separate buildings, and it's 52 kilowatts. And it is finally becoming what I think all of us want with transition and with eco-hubs and things like this, where we can facilitate discussions around not just energy, but how we can re-embed this energy debate and finance and legals back into the community, which then sits nicely in the environment. And that is that the reason why I really feel that this project is bigger, and it has the same sort of constructs as Brixton Energy Solar 1. But I'll just sort of give you a rundown of that, and that will give you the context, I think, to move through the rest of the talk, which is it has solar panels on it, and like the end game is we have some solar panels on the roof, and they generate energy. But what we're really after is creating well-being for people and communities within particularly Brixton and with Brixton Energy Solar One. And so we're trying to look at how do we get people involved from the outset. So we set up it as a cooperative so that the people all come together, and the whole principles of cooperatives that it's transparency, it's managed together, that every person has one share, one vote. So if you put in £250 or £20,000, you would have as much say as your neighbour. So that the structuring, the governing structure holds the cooperative. And then it's put together by, it's made of volunteers and community members and residents who go through the different questions around what will this energy generating, this green energy cooperative, what will it do for us, for the community? Because once the solar panels are up there, it just kicks away. It has 3 revenue streams with the government giving you a feed-in tariff, which we've all heard about, going up and down, but it gives you that. It also gives you energy for the building to use. And the third thing is you have another revenue stream that sells onto the national grid. So you have this pot of money to not only pay back investors, but to think about maybe doing something for that local community. So we set up a ring-fenced community energy efficiency fund, which gives to the directors of the cooperative and all the members of the cooperative, so with each project it's like 100 members, they can decide what they want to do with that money. So they can say, we want to do energy efficiency things, we want to knock on people's door, we want to do solar panel making workshops, and give those to people on the estate for free. So we facilitate that. So the financial revenue streams help to facilitate that. And it's governed not by the council or by a private sector firm or anything. It's by the people who are part of that cooperative. So what you end up having is a system where people have a chance to reskill, upskill, then power down. So you have energy efficiency workshops, people talking about how to reduce your energy. And then you have leadership enabling things, like everybody coming to these cooperative groups and working through things. They have that chance to really think through something and feel empowered. And finally, chances for jobs. We're working directly with Southern Solar on how our interns, like the young kids from the estates, they will then, they learn about the finance, the IT, the tech, and then finally, they get to do a work experience where they help us do solar panel making workshops, and then get trained where they sit on the actual installation, and they get to work with them and have paid work experience. And so that really completes something, so they can come in and have that dynamic interplay about what it means to be engaged and give them a chance. Because one thing people always do is from transition towns and ideas like hubs and this and that, is you come up with good ideas in glass towers, but sometimes can forget, like on the ground, that people in low-income brackets don't want a ticket out. They want to stay where they are, and they want to be empowered where they are. They don't feel bad to be on the estate, they just feel that they've been disempowered. So they love their homes, and that's one of the major things that this project facilitates. So I think while I'm one of the directors for Brixton Energy, I'm also the director for Repowering South London. And all of the back-end stuff, like all the financial modeling and the business plot models and the community, the setting up of the dialogue, the facilitation of getting all the community members and facilitating that with the financial modeling and working those things through. I'm also the director of that, which has done all that back-end servicing for the Brixton Energy Solar 1, Solar 2, and Solar 3. And what we're doing now is helping to create a 3-year internship program so that we actually come out with work apprenticeships at the end. And it's really been a fantastic process.
So I'm going to sort of talk you through my story, if you can bear it, which started quite a few years ago with community energy. I did a degree in energy technology about 20 years ago now, and eventually decided I wanted to do something to build solutions. So about 15 years ago I set out to set up a community-owned energy co-op. At the time people thought I was a complete utter madman. They'd never heard of the idea, and in Denmark they've been doing it, but in the UK it was a real oddity. So in the end I thought, well, a bit easier, I'll set up a solar company. So I set up Southern Solar, which over the last 10 years I've grown from me to a team with 6 offices across the south, helping people like Agamem deliver projects in Brixton and various other places. But about 5 years ago, in my hometown of Lewes, Transition Town Lewes kicked off. It was the second transition town in the country, and I got involved with the unleashing and ended up finding myself chairing the energy group. And of course, when you get a whole load of people in a room and they start talking about energy, they say, well, why don't we just build a big turbine on the hill, and that will power our town? It's like, that's a really great idea. Now, who wants to stump up 50 grand at risk to make it happen? And then it all goes a bit quiet. So off the back of that, I saw an opportunity to set up a renewable energy co-op, and that's what I'm going to talk you through. Avesco is the name of it, the Hughes Valley Energy Services Company. And I saw an opportunity to run a grant scheme for our local council, Lewes District Council. So one week I was travelling and I formed a company with some of the other people from the Transition Town group. And I wrote a business plan and I put in a tender to run this renewable energy grant scheme, which we won. So then we suddenly had an office with a person who was part-time who could work developing our first project. So off the back of that, we started looking at a hydro turbine in our local river, and after spending about 15,000 quid in about 2 years on that, we realised that that was a really hard place to start, and then along came the feed-in tariff. So we got on the case and built, I think it was probably the first community-owned PV roof in the UK, which was, we picked a really, really important community building. It was our local brewery, and we covered it with 100 kilowatts of solar. We thought, you know, if it all goes wrong, we need to start with the most important building, make sure the beer's cold. And we had a big unleashing in our town hall where we had 300 people, and within 3 weeks we'd raised the 300,000 we needed at that time to build the project, and within about 2 months after that we'd completed the project. Avesco has gone on now to build another 4 systems, and we're just working on what will be a field for solar panels, so about a megawatt of solar, and we hope that in about sort of a month's time, 2 months' time, we'll be launching another share issue to try and raise £1 million to do another large project. And to put it in context, when we've got all that portfolio of projects, we have a community energy company that funds itself for the next 25 years that will just run, basically. It's a sustainable business. It will employ someone to develop projects. Now, for me, solar's brilliant. Okay, I run a solar company, but I like solar because it's so accessible. It's very, very easy for people to get involved and start doing something. If you start thinking about a wind turbine or a hydro project or a biomass project, for a start they're often really, really big capital-intensive bits of kit, and it's quite hard to find a place to put them. Whereas with a solar project, you can just find a small roof and start with that, and it gets you off the blocks, and it sort of proves a track record, basically. But for me, it's all about community energy, and I think, yes, we're way behind Europe. But it just means we've got the biggest opportunity. If you look at Denmark, the reason we've got a global wind energy, large global wind energy business is because of Danish consumers who in the 70s, in the response to climate change and the various challenges, got together as communities and they set up wind fields in their local villages. And if you drive across Denmark, you can start for the first few hours driving playing Let's Count the Wind Turbines. And after about 2 hours, you really have to stop because you just can't keep up with the number that you see. And every little village, every town has a wind turbine, and they are all community owned. And that's why Vestas and all these other large global businesses came from Denmark. So, and then if you look at places like Sweden, there's district heating networks that are powered by solar thermal up there. Stuff that you really wouldn't expect. And then you take Germany, where they currently have 600 energy co-ops. There's 2 new energy co-ops being formed a week in Germany at the moment. And about 8-9 years ago in Bavaria, there was a town where I think it was the local mayor, decided, right, I want this town to go 100% renewable, and to facilitate it, we're going to buy the grid, the national grid in the area. They then went on to do that. That town is 100% powered by renewable. And the guy that led that, his current project is Berlin. So they're planning right now, a community energy company, to buy the grid of Berlin and take the whole of Berlin renewable. So, not off-grid. I mean, we use the grid to interact, basically, to keep the balance of power across all these technologies, but that's the scale it's at in Germany. And you mentioned the sort of 60% community ownership. Yeah, basically, renewables right now in Germany is about 25% of their total electricity production. 60 to 70% of that is community owned. And for me, that's really exciting, because if you think, right now across Europe, we've got 5 large companies that dominate energy supply. Now, as this shift, this transition happens to decentralised, community-owned power, you know, their business models basically fall apart. And actually, we need that to happen to make this change. Because currently we've got a system where you've got a large power station sat in the middle of somewhere, in the middle of nowhere. You put in 100 barrels of coal, you only get 22 bits of energy out the end here. All the rest is wasted in production and transmission. You know, so the quicker, you know, and they've got billions of pounds invested in those assets, they're not going to move quickly to getting rid of them and changing them. So the quicker we get on and generate the energy we need locally, the quicker we're going to see change, in my opinion. So for me, that's why community energy is so important. Because the large corporations, you know, their vested interest, yes, they will change their business models, yes, they will build offshore wind turbines, yes, they'll probably start acquiring solar parks when they get the chance, but you know, to really move this fast, we need to engage people, and that means engaging people's money as well. You know, and the quicker we can get money out of bank accounts that are frankly doing nothing right now, and into solar investments that are doing perhaps a bit more, and having an impact in our local community, the better, basically. So, I mean, we've got sort of, in the UK, we've got this sort of strange dialogue, and it's renewables or nuclear and fracking. You know, and when you look at the future that is being sort of portrayed with fracking and renewables and nuclear, sorry, frankly, you know, I really just don't want a part of that. You know, they're talking about more fracking rigs spread across the UK than the entire number of wind turbines we've got at the moment. You know, there'll be so many of the damn things to try and get the gas out of the ground. You know, and that's if the thing works at all in terms of environmentally. It's very dubious. So we're at a start moment, I think, in sort of the energy dialogue in the UK. And the more communities that come together and actually start doing something, the better. I mean, why co-ops? To me, it's a no-brainer. It's a really great way to do something equitable in your local community and to create. You know, so with Avesco, we started with one project. You know, you just need a few people to come together and put one small project, and you start to build track record, and you start to build trust, and you start to give returns to investors, and then you can start thinking about the stuff that I'd really like to do, things like district heating networks. So there's a town in Sweden that's got a district heating network. When they came to repower this thing, so basically all the houses are supplied with heat rather than gas or oil. When they came to repower it and put in new boilers, they worked out that it was cheaper for them to put 10,000 square metres of solar thermal panels in a field next to the town than it was to put in the same size boiler. So they did that. Those solar thermal panels provide 30% of the heat requirement of the entire town. You know, so there's some really interesting things for us to do. I came across a project in Canada where they built 150 new homes, and they made the garage roofs out of solar thermal panels. They plugged the whole lot together, and they plugged it onto like a borehole, basically. So in the summer, they're producing way more heat than they need. They pump it down into the ground, deep down into a well, and in the winter they suck that heat back out again. And the solar panels there are providing 92% of the heat requirements of those buildings. So this is totally possible. The thing that's preventing it is, you know, a monopoly industry that's basically really quite controlling of our politicians and the way things are running. So the more we engage individually in this and take back the power, the faster it's going to move. You know, if not us, who? If not now, when? You know, it's one of those moments, I think. And I think there's a great opportunity for us to come together and make a huge change, as has been done in other countries. You know, let's follow Germany's lead. They've done the lion's share of making solar cheaper for the world. You know, and for me, when you sort of project forward, I was in Africa last year, and when you see what solar can do there, it's unbelievable. So if you think about silicon, so you've lived through 2 silicon revolutions already. You've lived through the computer chip and the arrival of that. It's like every home will have a PC. Oh no, they won't. And the internet. Oh my goodness. And now you've got it all in your pocket. So that's all silicon. Now solar panels, the PV ones that people are putting up, They're silicon as well, and it's the same sort of story. So in Africa, they didn't have landlines, they just went straight to mobile phones. 70% of people in Nigeria do their banking on a mobile phone, and it's going to be the same with solar. We're just going to bypass the big centralised energy industry and go straight for a distributed, locally owned system. So the work we do here to make these models work and to reduce the prices has a huge impact across the world. So let's make it happen.
It's a really good number to conjure with, thanks for that. So starting with the question, can community-owned green energy cooperatives be part of the solution to the UK's energy challenge? Well, yes. So that's that answered. I am a little bit of a sort of outlier here. I'll probably tell you a little bit about the organisation I work with, but we're all about other people's stories. So I'll start with our own, or one of the people that sort of started within Leapfrog. So Leapfrog came into being probably about 6 years ago. Environmental lawyer, so senior environmental lawyer who was sitting in a meeting with one of their clients and talking about what they were going to do within a project to offset the impact of some big scheme that they were working on together, and was challenged by that client on the basis that they were talking about an offsetting scheme, something that was around African rainforests and doing some great things. But the challenge that was put to this lawyer was, that's great, but there are lots of NGOs, there are lots of things working on offshore things, but who's helping the UK? What's happening in the UK? Who's supporting this burgeoning revolution? And the person that made that challenge was actually a guy called Gary Charnock, who was one of the leading lights behind one of these early projects, Ashton Hayes, Going Carbon Neutral, which was the first village to say, you know, we want to be a carbon neutral village. And that started a thought process that led that lawyer to say, okay, right, well, I'm a lawyer. In the legal sector, people give their time. It's called pro bono. It's part of the way that we learn. It's part of the way the industry functions. Frankly, it's part of the way that it wins its work and it networks. How about I do that? So he went out to look at projects that he could volunteer on. He went to look at projects in the UK where he could put his time as a lawyer and help this energy revolution that was just beginning to see the light of day. And the first project he volunteered on fell over horribly, and I won't tell you who it was, but it didn't work. And it didn't work because he, as a single lawyer, supporting that project that was a volunteer project in its own right, it wasn't enough. So he started socialising this, and it took him 3 years, a lot of nagging, and I think you know Steve. He's a persistent chap. He got a lot of people on board with this idea, a lot of people agreeing with him, but not a great deal of action. So 3 years ago we launched this Carbon Leapfrog. The carbon came from the fact that even though we were funded by lawyers, none of them thought to look up the copyright of the name until we'd already printed all of our logos. So we're Carbon Leapfrog, Leapfrog for short. And we had a big launch event, a lot of goodwill, a lot of good intent, but basically 6 projects and a let's get on with it. And in the last 3 years, we have seen, and I say we because I only joined the organisation 9 months ago, so I'm riding on other people's efforts here, but we've seen an amazing revolution within the UK, some amazing projects, and if Agamemnon wasn't here, I'd be talking about the amazing projects that we support, and he's one of the ones that we talk about an awful lot, because it is phenomenal what people have achieved in that time. And the people that have achieved that are the people in these groups, the community groups that come together, and then Leapfrog broke us in the bit that's missing. So we now work with lawyers, we work with bankers, we work with accountants, we work with marketeers, we work with technical consultants, all of whom for various reasons want to donate their time and get involved with these projects because they want to make a contribution. And what they do is, rather than going and digging an allotment somewhere or going on a team building exercise, they use that volunteer time to make something happen. And you get the picture at the end of it. You get the people on the top of the Brixton Council estate where people get stabbed. And they've done something amazing. And it is just truly stupendous. But within that, it still relies so much on, well, what I've always called the willful individual has been prevalent in the environmental space. And I suspect there are a lot of them here today. I mean, there's certainly some people here that fall into that category, the willful individual. Now, I suppose the thing that challenges me tonight is, are there more willful individuals in Germany? Or is something else going on here? Because frankly, I come to something like this, and we go to a lot of events, we all go to a lot of events. it's amazing how many times you meet the same people. Over and over again, the same people pop up, and they're all these willful individuals who are going around, and they are making a phenomenal difference. Are there any more out there? Because Leapfrog is there, and we're ready to help these individuals, and we're ready to help them, but we can only help a project that exists. And unfortunately, it is quite a closed shop. There are only so many of these people that are stepping forward and doing these projects. So, to finish up, I said, can community-owned green energy cooperatives be part of the... Yeah, yes, obviously they can, because they're here and they're sitting in front of you. Bloody obvious that it's possible. But how many of them can we make happen? Where are the barriers? And how many of you people could become the willful individuals? And how can we make you those willful individuals of the future? And how can you achieve that? Because these people are stupendous, but they're just people. And that's all I was going to say.
Okay, well thanks first of all, Anders, for inviting me along, most appreciated, and thanks very much for you all staying. Right, I set up Energise Barnet in 2011, basically because the council, in my view, with great respect to them, wasn't doing enough to help improve the energy efficiency of homes to create mass demand for renewable energy. So I badgered them and badgered them and badgered them, and over the course of that last year or so, I thought, right, how do we get the community involved? So what I went about doing was inviting the whole community to take part. So getting schools to refer parents, getting resident associations to refer their members, getting churches, synagogues and mosques to refer their congregations, getting businesses to refer their customers, getting tradespeople, painters, plumbers, decorators, what have you, to refer people. And I thought, well, if that way we get the whole community involved, then we can truly implement change. So I started that ball rolling, and we've now got a lot of organisations that are involved, but there's a lot more to go. We've got GPs involved, practice managers, district nurses, community nurses, getting everybody involved, and I thought that would be the way to get things moving. So I kept on badgering away at the council, and then eventually in November they said, right, okay, last year, we'll give you, draw up a delivery plan for achieving what you want. Delivering and using, for example, the Green Deal, the energy company obligation, the renewable heat incentive, the feed-in tariffs, to create what you're saying needs to be done in Barnet. So we presented that plan to the council in November, a £200 million plan to improve 40,000 homes and buildings, reduce carbon emissions by 1 million tonnes, to take over approximately 50,000 people out of fuel poverty. And that went to the council. And 2 weeks ago they came back and said, right, we'll start the ball rolling. So they are now going to refer leads that come through from people that are interested in the Green Deal and eco and renewable heat incentive feed-in tariffs. So we've now got the council on board, we've got the MPs on board, we get the councillors on board, and hopefully all will go swimmingly well. But obviously a lot of problems and challenges in the way, because relatively speaking, there's a lot of people that are disinterested in the community, unaware of how they can benefit from improving their homes by implementing installation and so on, and generating their own renewable energy by, for example, using their rooftops to put on solar panels. So, as a community organisation, we've got to go out there and convince them all about the benefits of doing that. So that's what it's all about. Setting up a community organisation, trying to get your local community involved and motivated, and as I say, if all pulled together, hopefully it will work, but only time will tell. So, as part of that, I got invited to go along by the Energy Minister to join their Community Energy Contact Group, which basically is now advising DEC and governments on the role of communities in delivering the green agenda. So what I'd like to just briefly touch on, with the time left, give you an insight as to where things are going on that. And the first thing to say is community energy is not just about renewable energy generation. The strategy that will ultimately emerge is about improving the energy efficiency of homes and buildings, reducing fuel poverty, helping implement smart metering, and of course generating renewable energy. So there's a number of different facets to what you would define as community energy. So that's the first very important thing. The second important thing to say is that government believes that the role of community organisations in delivering this agenda is very important indeed. But they're struggling with, and as indeed many people in industry are struggling with, can actually community organisations like us and AGE and everybody else that's involved in these organisations deliver? Big, big question. Because A, we're all very small. B, we don't have substantial financial resources on board. C, we rely on volunteers. So can we actually really create a sustainable business model to take community energy forward? Big, big question mark. How many community organisations actually have got people on board that have true business skills, that have actually run businesses before, that know the problems that can arise? How many people know about business development, sales, marketing, operations, IT? So in other words, what the community energy sector has got to do if it's going to become sustainable, it's got to become more like a business, in my view. But with a big fundamental difference, that as a community organisation, instead of then the profits going to shareholders it would do in a private community, it goes back into the community. So we set ourselves up as Energised Barnet as a community interest company, not a cooperative. Basically, because as a community interest company, then we can make profits, we can pay out dividends, but the bulk of those profits will then have to go back into the community to, for example, help reduce fuel poverty and other reasons. So, the legal model of setting up a community organisation clearly is also a big decision that any new community organisation is going to have to decide upon. So, community energy, tremendous opportunities. Government believes it. The good question is now, how will those community organisations establish themselves, become sustainable? And if any community organisation believes that they can rely on, for example, feed-in tariffs going forward, then they're wrong, because the feed-in tariffs are not going to be around forever. So that's the first thing, also another major consideration to take into account. So a whole host of issues, and as part of the community energy strategy, now a framework is being built around some of those things that I've mentioned. That community energy strategy will then go through the offices of DEC and up to ministerial level. Then a consultation will then go out to which various stakeholders are invited to input. And those stakeholders will be not just community organisations themselves, but there will be Green Deal providers, there will be the energy suppliers, there will be retailers, there will be trade associations like the Micropower Council, the National Insulation Association, all inputting to that strategy. And then it will go out to general consultation, and all being well, hopefully there'll then be a community energy strategy published and agreed, hopefully by as many organisations as possible, by the autumn. So that's the plan, and I think the very fact that government has decided to push forward with this community energy strategy says very clearly to me that yes, community energy has a big future, a big opportunity. It's a question now of how we all go out and grasp it. So that's basically all I wanted to say. Hopefully I'm not exceeding my 7 minutes, but anyway, that's that. Right, thank you.